Welcome everyone to the fourth episode of Huddle Up with Matias Bueno. Today's guest is a two-time BCFC All-Star, csAFX All-Canadian, top receiver of the BCFC, as well as the BCFC Offensive MVP. Please welcome Whitman Tomusiak. Whitman, welcome to Huddle Up, man. How are you doing?
Hey, good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. So Whitman, again, we have another interesting dynamic with your career in football. You've been all over the place, originally based out of Vancouver Island. Was football something that was a part of your life from when you were very little growing up, or was it something you picked up later on when you got to be closer to an adult?
Yeah, right from the beginning, because it was really my dad's favorite sport. So he's a big CFL fan, so he was always watching it growing up, and that's basically how I got into it.
So were you a big BC Lions fan then growing up, being from Vancouver Island, or did you watch more NFL as a kid?
No, I started with the CFL, and then I got into NFL more when I started playing Madden and stuff like that. So it was, I was definitely a BC fan when I was a kid.
So talk a little bit about your experience with being a Lions fan. So for those who may follow the CFL, the Lions have been a bit of a middle of the pack franchise in terms of the number of Grey Cups. Their recent successes have been more prevalent in the last 25 years or so. So what was your first big memory of watching the BC Lions growing up?
It would have been like the Damon Allen years when they won the Grey Cup. I think that was when Steve Barato came in, and they had Alfred Jackson at receiver. And that's really the first like conscious memory I have of really following that season and being just kind of glued to it.
I remember when I was a young kid, my friends would talk about at school that the Lions, they won the Grey Cup when it was hosted here in Winnipeg in 2006. Was that a really fond memory of yours, watching that Grey Cup? Or were there other Grey Cup, or did you watch the 2000 Grey Cup that BC won against the Alouettes in Calgary?
Yeah, the 2001. Then 2006 was what, Dave Dickinson, I think, or
Yeah.
Casey Brenter's years. Yeah, that one's like a vague memory. I remember it, but not that well. And then of course, like 2011 when Harris was playing for them, that's the one I remember the most.
So you have a bit of a connection with watching Andrew Harris, having played for the Vancouver Island Raiders, the team that you're most well known for in terms of your football success. Can you talk about what that meant to watch Andrew Harris win a Grey Cup as a guy that had only played junior, especially playing for the BC Lions, and how your dynamic was with having known him through the football club?
Yeah, it was kind of different, I guess, because I was playing just like high school and community ball in Nanaimo. So the Raiders were actually a pretty big deal back in the days. They were a really sick team, right? So like Harris was kind of like a local celebrity in town, I guess. And certainly if you're a football fan, you'd go watch, and it was undeniable that like they have basically like a top Div 1 level talent playing in your backyard. So everyone would kind of watch him. And then I knew I'd get to the Raiders the year he left. So I never thought I'd ever play with him, obviously. And then it was obviously like years later kind of cool to be in the locker room like on BC with him. So
yeah, Andrew Harris, again, people could argue the best Canadian running back in the league right now, and some like to make the argument that he's one of the best Canadian running backs ever. And so what was the lore of the Vancouver Island Raiders growing up in Nanaimo? You said you played football there for all your life. You played for the Redmen, then you went to play for the Raiders. What was that first season like, and what was the feeling when you were finally signed to be a member of the team?
So like playing for the Raiders first time?
Yeah, your very first year there. What was the feeling like being able to be a part of a very historic club in the BCFC?
Yeah, it was cool because they had kind of this like, there was a certain like aura or mentality around it, right? It was like, it was something to be local and play for it, I guess, which sounds kind of weird now, but I mean, you go watch those games, it was like, damn, these guys are good. And then because I'm watching them, I knew a lot of the players. So it's kind of that like sensation you get when some people make it to pro, and then all of a sudden you're playing with guys you've watched on TV. It was kind of cool because I knew a lot of these guys, and when you've been watching them since grade 9, it's like, you know, you don't really see yourself playing there at that point, but then you're there, and yeah, you're just smashing pads with them. So
what was the transition like you played for the Nanaimo Redmen, the midget-based football team in Nanaimo, and to move up to the Raiders? Was it a big jump? Was it would people at the time, did people classify that midget was better than the high school teams in Nanaimo, or did people see midget as a lower tier compared to the high school teams?
We didn't see it that way. I should just say too, I grew up more near Victoria in a place called Cobble Hill. So it's actually Cowichan. So I originally started playing football in Cowichan, and they had a team that folded. So that's why I ended up in Nanaimo, but just to give those guys their due. And yeah, I mean, it's a debate. We had a lot of good players that year of midget. It was a lot of guys who kind of are good high school players and maybe not moving up, but to give you an idea, the Redmen, like Dylan Chaplain played for them, Marshall Cook played for them, Andrew Smith played for them, who was a bit before my time, but he played in Montreal. So they had good talent there. I never played high school, so I can't really compare it, but yeah, don't really want to get into who is better. I just don't really know. But we had the midget league was pretty good. There's a few good teams like North Delta, North Surrey. They had some good players for them, so it was a pretty decent league to play in high school.
And then the first year with the Vancouver Island Raiders, did you find that the transition was pretty easy, or did you think that it was a bit of a step up the first few games and first few practices, even during training camp, to really get adjusted to the speed of the game at that level?
I mean, it's definitely a level up. You start playing with men, but I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like statistically, starting from my first game in junior, I was better than I was my last year in midget, which is weird. But I guess it's because like I had Jordan Yance throwing me the ball, and all of a sudden it's like all these, like you don't have to just be an athlete out there. Like I can just run routes and the guy can get me the ball. So it's like statistically it was almost like easier, but if that makes sense. But obviously, yeah, like the talent's better and people are faster and stronger. And especially then, like the biggest thing for me is I was only like, I think 165 pounds. So if I wasn't careful and I let people get their hands on me or hit me pretty solid, I just wasn't as strong as them. So that was obviously the biggest factor of going up to that level.
And so how did you find that you fit into the offensive system? Obviously, Jordan Yance, for those who are watching who may not know, was one of the most prolific passers in CJFL history, let alone the BCFC. Threw for 3,000 or 3,500 plus yards every season he played for the Raiders out of Regina. Was an all-Canadian, absolutely fantastic player. Was it almost like playing with I heard when I was on Vancouver Islands, guys talked about it being like playing with a coach on the field. Can you agree that it kind of had that same sort of feeling when you were playing with him in your years?
Yeah, it's more like playing with someone who threw and was of the athletic ability of what you'd expect like a Div 1 quarterback to be. So he was like if you put Jordan Yance in Madden, his stats, his arm power, his throw accuracy, all that stuff is right up there with probably the elite guys, right? So it was like this guy. It's actually rare even in junior to have a guy who can literally make all the throws, but like he literally could make all the throws that would be required in a pro offense at junior. So I mean, the ball came in hot. I think he's still probably like the hardest throwing quarterback I've ever played with. So yeah, he was also like a leader and stuff too, right? So it was something. It felt he was like kind of the prototypical quarterback. He was what you thought a quarterback was.
And so you won the Rookie of the Year in your first year in the BCFC. And what was your mentality in terms of going into playing for the Raiders? Obviously, having watched them for a few years, and you leveled up and you got used to the transition, the routine of playing in the CJFL. How did you keep yourself focused on making sure that you can maintain and continue to scale your success in the coming years after winning Rookie of the Year?
I mean, the mentality there, it was never like I was, I still had to earn my spot. And even going into 2011, I knew I'd probably be a starter, but there was so many good players on that team where it wasn't like I was, above anyone yet. So I don't know. It was a good mentality around the team. Everyone was really trying to get better, right? And Schaefer had a really big year in 2010. So there's always like a little bit of competition amongst the receivers and stuff then too. So people are trying to step their game up. But I don't think that was never really a problem. It was really like if anything, there's more motivation to be better because it was kind of a tight unit, which is what a good team should be. So yeah, we were just trying, and of course we lost the Canadian Bowl that year, so there was lots of motivation, and so yeah, it was never really a factor of trying to keep it going. It was more like how can we get better kind of attitude.
So that was the 2010 season. That was your first year there.
Yeah, exactly.
So then you guys played the Hilltops in the Canadian Bowl. Was that in Saskatoon?
It was, yeah, really bad bus ride on that one too. So we bussed out to Saskatoon that year, and then if you can imagine, that's a long bus ride from Vancouver Island, and going there is all right, but after you lose a fairly close game, it's quite a ride back. So
Talk about the emotions of what you felt during that game and what the team was thinking during and afterwards. It was a close game, and obviously for CJFL fans, they know that the Hilltops have, or teams from Saskatchewan have won every single national championship since the Raiders last won in 2009. Did you guys feel like you should have won the game, or what was the feeling like during and afterwards after having competed so closely against such a good team?
it was at that point, it was the feeling was that we needed to play those guys or that kind of competition a few times, and we'd probably get them. If I had to give like a random number on it, I'd say we'd win 4 out of 10 of those games. But this is the early years for me with Raiders, 2010, 11. We pretty much just killed every team in the BCFC. So we weren't, of course, 2012, 13, Langley, really good teams. We had more challenge then, but those years we just needed to kind of face that adversity. So I feel like that was really the difference. And we definitely could have beat them, but they're a really good team. I think they might have been slightly better than us, and the game could have gone either way. And obviously they pulled it out.
And the Hilltops again, what did you guys see on film, and what did you think when you knew that you had been beating teams by 50, 60, 70, 80, and all of a sudden you're going up against guys who could be leading on you through 3/4 of a game? Was it really tough to handle those emotions and that the adversity that was necessary to come back in the midst of that game, or did you guys know that it was going to be a lot tougher than it may have seemed on film?
It seemed tough on film, so they were about what I thought they'd be. The Hilltops, for everyone who knows the Hilltops, they play the exact same defense, and they always have. And when you get out there, it is what you think it is. They just do it really well. So yeah, what happened is they hit us in the mouth in the first half, and we were coming back in the second half. So that was really the difference. I think obviously it's not how a game works, but if you could start it from the second half on, it was an even game. Maybe we even beat them in the second half, but they took like 2 kick returns to the house in the first quarter. So you're starting like 14-0 down. So that kind of sucked, but that was really that game. And they were just a little more prepared, a little more mentally tough, a little more hardened, I guess.
Did you find that playing in Saskatoon in that weather, do you feel that had a decent effect on the morale and mentality of your team, or did you feel that you guys were very resilient mentally and weren't phased by being in a new environment, especially against Saskatchewan in comparison to the winters you guys experienced in Vancouver Island?
Yeah, I guess the Prairie guys are used to it. That game, I don't remember being that bad. I wasn't really thinking about the cold. In 2013, we played Regina, and that was freezing. That was like you need to be standing by the heaters, but that wasn't really a factor that game, I don't think.
Did you find that so when you played for the Raiders, again, a lot of talent all around the ball on the offensive side, did you find that you guys were a better passing team than a better running team, or did you find that it was pretty balanced? And how did you use that preference of your offense to excel in your role?
We were certainly known for passing, I'd say, just with Yance throwing the ball, and we had 5 really good receivers, I guess. But there's a running back, Jordan Botel, who was a running back in those days, 2010 and 11. And I don't know if he got, I think he got like an All-Canadian, or maybe it was BCFC All-Star, but he was a great back. So he was kind of overshadowed, but that's not to take anything away from him, because I mean, he went on to CIS, and I think he was a nominee for the Het Crichton. So many props to him. So we were actually pretty balanced in those years for sure.
And are there any games from the initial years with the Raiders that really stuck out to you in your memory as some of the best ones that you experienced, or what do you think was your best performance that you had early on that really showed you, I can really play well in this league and I can set myself as one of the top guys apart from all the rest of the receivers?
Well, I guess my first game with the Raiders, so it was like week 1, I was leading the league in receiving after that game. So I knew I could play at that level. That's for sure. I think that stayed to like week 3 till Shaper just kind of started running everything. Um, so I mean, that's where I knew I certainly was able to play at this level. I mean, I'm a rookie and was doing fairly well. But my favorite games would be, it was really the playoffs that year. So we played, what was the semifinals? I don't even remember the semifinal game, but the final game was actually a really close game versus Okanagan. I should give Okanagan their due. In 2010, they had a really good team and they were fairly competitive with us. In 2011 was really the year where no one in the BCFC was competing, but that 2010 Okanagan team was really good. So we actually went down to a field goal to beat them in the BCFC final. And so we pulled that out, a really close game. And then, we played Lang. They were called the South Surrey Rams in 2010, and we played them in the semis. And I had a really good game that game, so it was good there. So I remember that one. Okanagan game was tough, and then we played the Intergold against Hamilton, and I had a really good game there too. So it was kind of cool going on like that playoff run with the Raiders, because at that time they were always a top contender and always kind of expected to win or at least be in the Canadian Bowl. So it was kind of being part of that ride and also being a main factor in it, I guess, which was really cool. So I remember those 3 games, or 4, I guess. It was the semis, that whole playoff run, semis, final, and then the Intergold, and of course the game against the Hilltops was really cool. It was like, it's a long run, right? Because you get like 2 weeks between them, and that was really fun. And that was kind of when I was getting to know all the guys and the team was getting really tight and stuff. So I really think that was my favorite year at the Raiders, probably was 2010. It was just like all kind of the old guys who I'd watched were still playing, right?
So in terms of how you were affected and molded, you eventually became a leader or one of the prominent leaders on the team, starting with some like the old batchy guys you mentioned that you watched growing up. Would you say that there was a specific coach, obviously Coach Snoop, very famous in the BCFC, maybe him, or was there another coach that you found that really helped to foster and mold the mentality that you had and develop you into the receiver that you became to be in junior?
Yeah, I mean, Coach Slatt was our receiver coach. Taylor Slatt, he's a guy who played like 2005 to 2007, so the really early Raiders teams. He was a really good receiver himself, but he was a great receiver coach. I remember like one of the first practices with him, it was like pouring rain, and he's like, look, catch with your body if it's raining. I've played receiver. I know it, just catch it kind of thing. And I remember like thinking, I'm like, hey, there's a guy who actually understands it. Cause like the worst thing is when you're playing receiver in the rain and like obviously the ball is going through everyone's hands, and there's always some guy who doesn't know what he's talking about screaming catch with your hands. And that's someone who hasn't played receiver, because you have to kind of use your body to stop the ball in a rainy game. So it's like I kind of respected him for that right away. It's like, okay, I mean, this guy at least has been there. So there's one. It would also just be the kind of competition. We had a really tight unit in those days. So it was like me, Michael Shaper, Dustin Peterson, Andrew Smith, then later a guy named Matt Sawyer. We were all really tight, and we'd hang out off the field all the time and stuff too. So we'd always push each other. And yeah, like you mentioned, Coach Snoop, he's, as a pure football coach, he's probably the best football coach I've ever seen or ever been around. And I've been around football for a bit, like until he actually part of the organization, and with him, he was like he's a brilliant motivator, a brilliant football coach. And I mean, I think just in my opinion, he's the best coach I've ever been around for at least from a motivational standpoint, kind of like the old school coach.
And yeah, well, Coach Snoop, he had a fantastic run with the Vancouver Raiders when he was there, and departed in 2013 after the season was done. And it sounds like that earning respect right from the get-go was important to really hone you guys as a unit, especially for you as a player to know, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about, and he's not just barking orders at us like a dog and thinks that he knows all and that he's almighty and superior. And so as the season went on, you guys talk about how you faced adversity in the playoffs. In 2011, you didn't experience much adversity. So how did things change once that 2012 season, the infamous game for the Raiders being the Cullen Cup in Nanaimo against the Langley Rams? Talk about it with the previous guest, Anthony, on the winning side of that. What was your guys' mindset after that game on the losing side in 2012 against Langley? And how did you carry that momentum into the 2013 season?
That's the first thing. First, the 2012 season, the 2013 season were really different. There's a lot of guys left after 2012, so wasn't much carrying the momentum forward. But as far as that game goes, yeah, it was the 2012 Rams that was their best team that I played against for sure. They had their DB core. It was fun. I can't remember everyone's name, but they had. Jordan Lennon played. Nick, I can't remember his last name, but good halfback there too. And Tanner Hamadi was a corner and good safety. So as far as their defense goes, they 3 great linebackers. Their whole defense was very good. And then 2 receivers. Malcolm Williams was, I think a lot of people know him, was really good. But Nick Downey was a freak, man. Like, that guy was so good. He was a returner, but also just kind of like a gadget player on offense. You could just give him the ball or throw the ball to him. He was just a freak athlete. So that team was really good. And we battled it out with them in the regular season. And then, yeah, I think we tied one game and we won 2. We played them 3 times that year. And then all I remember about that final, it was raining. So our best, by 2012, our best offensive weapon was our passing game. And so obviously when you play in the rain, you can't pass quite as well. So I remember that, and I remember it just being like kind of a grind, and they just pulled it out. And yeah, it was a little, I guess, shocking. It's the first time that group of guys had really lost in like a BCFC situation. So yeah, good. I mean, props to them. I'm sure they're happy. It was their Super Bowl, whatever. They should have won the friggin' Canadian Bowl that year too. I watched that game. So that good team.
Yeah, I remember from watching old film on guys like Nick Downey, and people could argue the best returner in CJFL history is unbelievable athlete, and that's such a gut-wrenching loss that they had against the Hilltops. But when you went into 2013, you mentioned there that a lot of guys left the team between 2012 and 2013. So how did your mindset carry you to allow you to succeed in the following season after a shocking loss in the BCFC final the previous year? And I know that the 2013 season as well started, I think you guys started 1-2 and then ran the table all the way to the Canadian Bowl. So where did that jolt of adversity really come in to allow you guys to find that success after a bit of a disappointing start early on?
That was a weird year because everything just kind of came together. It was a bunch of new guys. And it was weird because a bunch of those guys didn't continue to 2014. So there's guys like Dylan Schrott was playing then, really good player. Like Alex Thompson was playing receiver for us. He's a lot of like one and done guys. Jamie Ybarra was a quarterback. He came back years later, but he didn't keep playing for them. Yeah, it was slow. I was hurt. I hurt my ankle playing flag that year. So I missed the first 2 games, I think. And then we played Langley game 3. It was really close. And then we just kind of never lost after that. But that was such a fun year because it was a totally different group of guys. But there was like we had this house. It was on Dundas Street. And it was basically like the goat house, man. Like it was so fun. And it was like that team was so tight that year. And it was, that was a lot of fun just for the pure, just everything that happened there. But yeah, I don't know. It was weird. I didn't know how good that team would be, but everyone came together, and a few guys like Dylan Schrott and stuff really took over and started becoming great players in themselves. And yeah, we ended up, I knew by the time like week 7 rolled around there, we weren't going to lose a game. So yeah.
So that tight knit chemistry must have been very important. I remember when I first got there in 2014, guys talking about the house on Dundas Street in the south part of Nanaimo. Well, was there a specific nickname for that house? I can't remember. I think I remember Brendan Latimer talking about that linebacker of the Raiders at the time. I can't remember. It sounded like something out of Blue Mountain State. Like that's exactly what it seemed like.
Yeah, I think it was just Dundas. It was known as Dundas, which was the street name, but that's what the house was called. But yeah, like everyone, it was the kind of thing that was like friggin' 6 players living in it at a time and whatever. And it was the party house and everything else.
So do you find that that chemistry is part of the main factor as to why you guys became so successful later on? Because obviously living on Dundas, especially in that part of Nanaimo, isn't the most glamorous. I'll say that from a firsthand experience, but you guys went from a totally just an isolated group of guys, none that came from the previous year, none that carried over. So was that bonding, is that one of the things you think really contributed to the team's success? Because you guys didn't practice football there, but I think that's where probably a lot of great memories were made.
Yeah, for sure. I should say always quite a few good players who carried over, like Jordan Kuziak and Dylan Chaplin and people like that were still coming back from the years before. Tyler Ollendorf, the big O lineman. Um, Again, I don't really know that year. I don't really know how it came together. Yeah, probably most of the credit would go to Snoop. Snoop's again, he's a great coach. So I think he kind of figured it out, and somehow the team just started winning. And it was, again, it was weird because I thought we'd be like a 5-5 team at the beginning of the year. I can't really say. Maybe it's because everyone was tight, but it was, yeah, just don't really know. Didn't think that team would be that good, but it was.
Was there a pivotal game that stuck out to you in your mind during that season that really said, okay, once we won this, or the way in which we played today, or even the way in which you performed in the game individually, you said, we can't be stopped. There's no way we're going to lose now.
Uh, Not really, but it was like, I remember we almost lost to Kamloops like week 4 or 5 or something, and then we came back after bye week, and all of a sudden, like the team was just like we beat Okanagan pretty easily, and then it was just like lights out from there. Again, it was like weird. I don't know how it went from being like kind of mediocre, not that organized, to just after bye week, no one was going to touch us. It's not the best answer, but again, that's I don't know what happened there, but it was just everything came together in 2013 until the Canadian Bowl.
Such an abstract way to find success, and especially again looking back on all the years, the 2007 to 2010 years were just unstoppable, and then the 2013 year starting with a losing record in 3 games and running the table the rest of the way, and then winning the so talk about, let's move over now to the Cullen Cup that year in 2013. Again, it was a rematch of the previous year against Langley in Nanaimo. I think you guys won 44-16 or something along those lines. Can you talk about what the feeling was going into that game, knowing with how the last season had ended, even with a little dribble of guys who had carried over from the previous year?
Yeah, I don't remember the mindset. All I really remember is we just kind of knew we were going to win. Like, I remember that week, it wasn't like an overly intense practice week or anything. It was kind of like we were gelling at that point where we just knew we were going to win. So, I mean, if we did somehow lose that one, it probably would have been a real shock. But yeah, like you said, I don't even remember the score. I remember it was I never felt like we were going to lose in the game or anything like that. So it was just kind of don't want to say a walkover, but it was just everything went as planned that week and during the game, and there wasn't much tension or anything. Yeah.
And then and then you guys played, I think, was it Windsor in Ontario the following week after beating Langley?
Yeah, Windsor. Yeah, we had to travel out there. So again, that game was fairly one-sided, I guess. So we won fairly handily there, and then we went to Regina that year, and that was a really cool game. And they got us. It was a weird game. I think it was like they scored a ton of points. It was something like 55-35 or something. It was a really high scoring game.
And so with playing the Regina Thunder, they'd kind of come out of nowhere that year. They beat the Hilltops in the PFC final for the first time ever, I think it was, because they hadn't been around for very long. And so what were you guys thinking going into the game against Regina after having won 2 previous playoff games very handily and having had such a very successful season after that slow start?
That was one where we, at least for me, I really didn't know what to expect. I remember their film looked like they were better on the field than their film looked. I'll give them that. That's for sure. And they were just, uh, they were a really good team. They had a lot of good players, really big line. It's one of those games where like the first opening kickoff happens and the first few plays happen. You could just tell their linemen and linebackers are smacking a little harder and stuff. So yeah, it was, uh, they lit us up. Let's put it that way.
So after the 2013 season ended, you guys lost the Canadian Bowl. And the following year, you were selected as a territorial exemption with the BC Lions. So what did it feel like then, going from having played for the Raiders, such a famous team that you'd watched for several years, to now jumping up a few steps to being a part of the BC Lions? And talk a little bit about how that process was to get there.
Yeah. Okay. That's probably why I don't have a great explanation about 2013 seasons, because I was actually the territorial during the 2013 season. So I was practicing with BC all throughout the week. And then I was just coming back for games with the Raiders. So 2013 was kind of, it was kind of a blur for me. Certainly I wasn't around the team as much as most, obviously all the other guys would have been. And again, I was basically just showing up on Friday walkthrough and then games on Saturday. But as for the Lions, I mean that's a big jump up, obviously. And when I was a territorial player, I was still, I mean, you kind of have this thing where you can, you're not really you're being evaluated, but you have a bit more leeway than other players would. So it was really just a learning experience. It's a bit of a wow factor. All of a sudden you're lined up on the field with guys you've been seeing on TV, and like Sean Gore, Manny Arsenault, Nick Moore, all those guys were there, and you're just kind of one of them and going through practice with them. So it was really cool. It was awesome. It was a really long training camp. I remember that because they back then I think they toned it down a bit, but we were doing a 1 a day and then a 2 a day, but they were like legit 2 a days. So it was like 3 weeks of that. So it was a tough camp. I remember that, but for me, it was just kind of absorbing it all in. It was really cool.
So what was the feeling like then when you were officially notified that you'd been selected as a territorial exemption with the Lions? And then how did that affect the way in which you prepared, in terms of, talk about the Raiders being a bit on the back burner when you show up for Friday walkthrough and playing games? Did you feel that you were doing your best to invest more time and energy into your time with the Lions, or how did you balance that dichotomy?
At that point, I'd say my mind was more in the Raiders because I knew I was just practicing with them, right? So I was just gaining experience. It was more of a thing for the future for me. Um, so yeah, I didn't like take away like Raider stuff or anything like that then, but it was more just like, it was actually really cool because I was, they give you a bit of money to go do that. So I was basically just in the week getting paid to practice and like training in the gym and stuff with the Lions. And so you're kind of just living the pro lifestyle, I guess, where you're just training and doing football 24/7.
And what was it like to be able to take part in that pro football lifestyle, especially while you were still playing with the Raiders? Did you find that it really helped you with being able to be more focused, or did you find that the pressure even raised and balanced with the amount of relaxation time that you got in between your 2 a day practices?
I found it was, so the 2 days were in training camp, not during season. So after training camp, it was just like you just practice with the Lions. So and pro practices are generally less intense than like junior or high school practices, just because they only wear pads once a week and stuff like that. So it was actually an interesting experiment because at least as a receiver, I always feel coaches wear your legs out too much. They run you too much, and they think you're getting in shape or whatever the kind of mentality is from it. I always thought it was too much playing receiver. Like you get, 5 games into the season, and then towards the end of the season, and you're wearing out, and you don't feel as fast, and you're getting like tight, and I always thought it'd be better to do more kind of strength and weight room training in the season and save your legs a bit and try to be really fresh and explosive for games. And anyways, that would be like a debate, but that was the one year I could kind of test that because I didn't have to practice with the Raiders, and pro practices are fairly easy, and I could just spend time like in the weight room and doing things like that. And I did feel way better for games that year. So if that's I don't know if that's anything, but that's my opinion on that from someone who's done it. But yeah, it definitely didn't wear me out. I was feeling more fresh.
So do you find that, so then after you were able to develop that routine, did you talk to any of the coaches when you came back and said, hey, maybe we should really lighten up on the receivers, or did you kind of keep it to yourself because you knew that it would be a bit controversial to raise that point with your coaches?
Yeah, I didn't raise it. I mean, this is not just with the Raiders. This is every football team is the same. They basically run it that way where receivers end up doing a heck of a lot of running in practice. So yeah, I didn't say anything.
So then what was the best part of your experience with the Lions? Did you feel a bit star-studded when you first got there? You mentioned the likes of Sean Gordon, Manny Arsenault, G.Y. Simon, some absolutely outstanding CFL receivers, G.Y. being a Hall of Famer, a GOAT receiver, people could argue as well. So how did you balance that star-studded those fanboy moments versus, okay, this is serious, I gotta make sure that I'm focused and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing?
Well, one thing is you're thrown right into it. So it's one thing to be maybe starstruck or whatever, if you want to call it that, but you can't really be that when you got Dante Marsh and bump and run right in your face and he's about to jack you up. So, I mean, you get over it pretty quick because they also it's the same thing they do in CIS. You watch film after every practice and, there's some accountability on your part there. You don't want to look bad. So, I mean, that doesn't last as long as you think. It's always cool. Like you play against a guy you've seen on TV, or especially at those camps, there's always like NFL guys who come in who, have started some games in the NFL. So you get to see how you do against a guy who's at least had a look in the NFL. But that all fades out fairly quick. It's kind of in the back of your mind, and you really just kind of get absorbed into it, or you better anyways, because yeah, you're part of it at that point. So the other thing I should say is it's like when you like there's a lot of American guys in the CFL, right? And they don't really understand what goes on here. So to them, you're just another guy out there. They have no idea if you're whatever a territorial exemption is in junior, or if you're like the first round pick. You're just like, they don't know. So, and especially if you're playing receiver, you're always against American DBs, and most of the guys at camp are Americans, and you just start hanging out with them and just become like, you're just there with them. You're both doing the same thing. So it's not you kind of get over that fairly quick. It's really cool at first, but yeah.
So then you were a big BC Lions fan growing up, and you got over that feeling. So then when you looked back at the experience you had, was it a different sentiment that you felt when you were able to reflect on your experience there in comparison to when you were living through it? Or did you still feel pretty even-headed about it after your experience there was done?
Like how I felt about the Lions, or just?
Yeah, like the time that you spent with the Lions there in the 2013 season, and then and what it was like being that junior player that was practicing with the Lions once you got out of that.
I guess in just 2013, it was different because I was there 2 more years, right? So it's hard to remember how I was then, but I remember it was different watching the games because you just would know everyone, and you know even all the trainers and stuff, and you had a little more invested in it then. So that was really cool. And it was also kind of cool where you learn the playbook, obviously, when you're at a training camp playing receiver. So you'd watch it on TV, and you're actually sitting there in the game plan, right? So you kind of knew what they were trying to do, and you knew what some of the audibles meant and stuff like that. So it was, I mean, as far as a fan goes, that's absolute front row seat, right?
And so the next year you played on the lines as an active roster player in 2014, correct?
Yeah, I made the team. I was on practice roster for the year, but yeah, I went into it as a, like, actually signed to contract and then had to make it onto the team. And there's no junior territory giving me an exemption or anything like that.
So then what was the mindset that you carried within yourself in order to maintain level headed enough to be able to stay with the team and to be able to make it throughout the entire season? Because obviously, like you said, you don't really have a safety net once you're not a territorial exemption anymore. So then what were you thinking to yourself when you went into the 2014 season, knowing that there was no going back, there was no real plan B, you couldn't play, you at that point, I don't think would have been thinking about playing university, and it was full-fledged CFL. So how did you handle that?
It starts, I guess, with you try to do whatever you can in the off season to put yourself in that position. And then, so you better be having your conditioning and your strength and stuff, be working on that. And then you get there and you kind of just have to look at it as you're going to put your best foot forward and see what happens. And luckily for me, I had a really good training camp in 2014. I think I wasn't. So I guess how it works is they can sign so many guys to a training camp. So there's usually like 100 guys show up to a CFL training camp, and the team, I think, is like 50 players. It might give or take a few, something like that. So you end up watching about half these guys get cut, and it's not really an even tryout either. So, because of course there's lots of guys coming back who are basically already on the team, right? Like they're not going to cut Travis Lulay or Manny Arsenault or something like that. So there's a lot of guys who you kind of know are just going to make it. And then what there really ends up is about 60 guys competing for about 10 spots. And that's harder if you're an American. So it's like literally they probably brought in, I think, something like 12 American receivers who were new. And one of them, who was Brian Burnham, ended up making practice roster that year. So it's super competitive that way. And as for Canadians, they bring in a few, and not everyone makes it either. Of course, they separate them from American and Canadians because they need so many Canadians on the roster. But I don't think I was really a guy they thought was going to make it at that point. So I had to have a really good training camp that year and made it. But I was pretty happy because, like, not to hype it up, but I performed really well in a lot of the scrimmages and stuff at that training camp. So, and in the exhibition game.
And I find it funny you mentioned Brian Burnham's name. Now, what is, he's the best receiver on the Lions, no doubt, and one of the best receivers in the CFL. He makes amazing circus catches. So so now that a significant amount of time has passed since that 2014 season, and you look back on the way that the team developed and the way that they went, what were your thoughts during that 2014 season in terms of how you performed and how the team was overall? And how do you look upon it now with seeing what guys have still been there since you were on the team versus the guys that faded out?
There's maybe only like probably 3 guys who I played with. That's how much turnover there is. I may be wrong, but there's not many guys I played with still on the team. 2014 was a great year. It was really fun. The thing I liked most about it was that was when the Lions were still a bit of a dynasty, so it was a recognizable team. So they still had an identity, I guess would be the best way to put it, where their receiving core, everyone knew. They'd been guys who'd been there for 10 years. Manny Arsenault, Sean Gore, Nick Moore was there. Nick Moore left, and then they brought in Keto Pablo, Marco Iannuzzi. Andrew Harris was the running back, but their DB core, everyone knew those guys, like Dante Marsh, Corey Banks, Ryan Phillips. It was the whole Lions era from kind of 2005 onwards was good because of that, because they had an identity, and it was a lot of the same guys every year. And 2014 was kind of like the remaining the last kind of year or last few years where that sort of core group of Lions guys who we were all fans of, grew up in BC, were still on the team. So it was really fun that way. Rolly Lumbala was another long time, Jason Iraqi, all those guys were still there. And it was really cool in that sense. It was really fun to play on one of those teams where it was kind of that core group of guys. So looking back on it now, Mike Benavides got fired after that season, and it was kind of too bad because Travis Lulay was kind of like the MVP quarterback, and he was hurt all year, and we went 8-8, which was reasonable. It certainly wasn't something you'd want to blow it all up because I think they should have kept Mike Benavides, and I think they should have kept their identity. I mean, look at Harris or something like that, right? Like he's obviously still a star, and they got rid of him eventually and were traded, I'm sure it's for money, but I really feel like for the fans, you want to keep these kind of core guys around, and that's why I don't know. I was talking to like my advisor. It's like I hardly name anyone on the team now because it's different every year. So that's kind of how I look back on it. I like those kind of old dynasty teams, I guess.
So as a Lions fan, then we talked a little earlier about how the identity of the team changes and how that has affected the fan base in terms of how popular the Lions are. From a Winnipeg perspective, the Bombers and the Riders have an eternal fan base, no matter how good or bad they are. And now the Red Blacks have come into their own since they got a team, and Hamilton's also been very prominent with having a very loyal fan base. But I feel like the Lions have wavered over the last 25 years, and it comes in droves of core groups of guys that really create an amazing identity. I know in the 90s when the Lions won in 94, and then they won again, I think in 97 or I think, no, sorry. I think they won in 98. So they won like 2 times within a few years, and they won the very famous Canadian versus American first ever Grey Cup against the Baltimore Football Club at the time. That was in Vancouver, and BC is one of the only teams to have ever won the Grey Cup at home in the CFL. So how does the changing the identity affect the fan base from your perspective? And do you think football is a very big part of BC's sports culture, or do you feel like it's very fair weather in terms of how much people pay attention to the Lions, and the shift is more to hockey and to soccer in terms of now the Vancouver Whitecaps being a part of the MLS?
There's definitely a lot of good football players that come from BC, so it's in the culture here a bit. There's lots of good high school. From my perspective, that's all I can say by, and maybe it's backed up by the fan base they're getting now, which seems to be going down. But I was much more of a fan when I had a team which was fairly consistent over the years. So yeah, how they've been kind of doing it since 2015, where everything's new all the time. And I don't know if they're just trying to get guys for minimum wage or not wanting to pay them or whatever it is, but that's my opinion. It's as someone who would watch it and has watched it for years, I think, you kind of want a core team where you get to know, and it's not different every year.
So now with how your experience went with the Lions in 2014, so you're in the practice roster the entire year, to back up a little bit, and you said you had a lot of fun playing that season. So then the next season, what was your goal? Did it stay the same in terms of wanting to improve yourself during the off season physically and mentally and just put your best foot forward? Or is it hard in the CFL to be able to kind of predict how things will go, and so you just take care of yourself and whatever happens and it doesn't matter? Or can you hold yourself accountable and be very confident in your abilities in terms of what you can expect the outcome to be for being on a team?
It's both, because definitely in pro sports, you never know one day to the next. There's very few athletes who get kind of that long-term security. But as far as me going into that season, it was definitely my best off season ever. I was 23. I guess I was like 23 going into it, but that was the most kind of freakish athleticism I ever achieved. Like I was the biggest. I think I was about 200 pounds, very low body fat, really fast, was stronger than ever. So I was feeling really good going into it. And to answer that, it was my best season, or my best off season going into a season ever. And I felt really good. So it was a bunch of things happened in 2015. Again, it's unpredictable in pro sports. I kind of came into the Lions with Mike Benavides, Jacques Chapdelaine. Those were kind of the guys there. And then after 2014, they blew it all up. So there's a whole bunch of new coaches came in and they kind of bring in their own guys, and they brought in Austin Collie from the NFL. And it was kind of like you're starting from square one as far as in showing the coaches what you can do. I really feel if Mike Benavides was still there, I feel like I might have been maybe one of his guys. I was with him for 2 years, and I think he liked what I was doing there. And then Jeff Tedford came in 2015, and it's basically trying to earn your spot again. You're always trying to earn your spot, but it's when the coaches know you and you're part of a system, it's just easier. I think everyone knows that who's been around it. And yeah, it was I was having a good camp. I felt really good. Like I felt like I was, as far as how I could perform, I was feeling, that was like the point where I felt like I could really, I wasn't too nervous going against these American DBs anymore. I knew unless they were some of the better ones, I knew I'd get them most of the time. But I pulled my hamstring about halfway through camp. So I wasn't, obviously at receiver, it's hard to run with a pulled hamstring. And then it can be kind of luck, right? Like there's some things, maybe I should have been stretching more and all that too. So you can try to minimize the kind of variables there. But yeah, it was then Jeff Tedford and that whole new group of coaches went with their guys, and that's kind of how quick it happened.
And so then the next year you took football off for about a year, and then got a phone call from the University of Calgary to get an opportunity to play CIS for one last hurrah year. So talk about the reflection that you had after being released from the Lions in 2014 or during the 2015 training camp, and what your mindset was with how you're going to carry things forward, and what made you convinced to actually go to University of Calgary, considering that you were starting to enter the phase of life after football.
When I was done with BC, I was kind of sticking around in 2015. Like Jeff Tedford would call me and I'd come up a bit if they had an injury or whatnot. So I was still in it a bit, but then I was basically done at that point. I wasn't one of these guys who really wanted to go chasing every last opportunity for the CFL. I mean, there's only so much money in the CFL, right? It's not like you're a millionaire if you make it. So I'd been part of the CFL for 3 years already. I wasn't, of course, one of those years was a junior, but you're still around it all the time. So, I had a good taste of it as far as like the life experience goes and everything. So where my mindset was basically done football. And then Brian Dobie called me from Manitoba, and he's like, you can still play CIS if you sit out a full year, right? And it's kind of weird because it'd been a while since I played junior, but because I played junior, I was in pro when I was 21, which is obviously much younger than most people would start it at. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of got thinking like, oh, maybe I'd go play CIS for 1 year just for the fun of it. Like, why not? It'd be just 1 year I have left. And then some things happened, and that was the year there where Simon Eyes, the UFC receiver, went to the NFL, and he did well out there and stuff, but they were going to lose him for the year. And I had a few ins with Calgary. Ryan Sheehan was their OC, and a great OC too. He was a guest coach at one of the Lions camps, so he kind of knew me. And then Coach Snoop was coaching the Colts then, so he could put in a word for me. And then Adam Lorenz was out there, who was an all-Canadian corner for them, and he used to play for the Raiders in 2011, and me and him are still good friends. So I all of a sudden had some ins. I always wanted to play for Calgary. They were my favorite CIS team growing up. I really liked what they did. They're awesome. Like Anthony Parker and Nathan Kuwarn and all those guys. And it was really cool. So anyways, they called and like, hey, if you want to come out for 1 year, let's do it. And we kind of got talking. It's like, why not? It's like 4 months I go out there and play a season, and that's it. And it was a great year. You were obviously part of that team too, so you know that.
Yeah. So, and it's crazy to think how those connections are made. And I remember when I saw you at spring camp, I'm like, he's still eligible. Like he's
Yeah.
playing. Like I've heard folklore of this guy. You know, like he's been everywhere. He's been in the CFL. He's been juniors, all Canadian, all star on the Lions, and here you are at University of Calgary, and it's such a, I think it was such a humbling experience to see the level of talent that was on the team, and that team was very good, and an unfortunate loss in the Vanier Cup to Laval Rougeois, and what many of the guys, if they're watching this too, that would say that they probably should have won that game, and
Yeah. Oh yeah. You asked me earlier about the Hilltops game, and like you always kind of say you think you should have had it, but like at best we were 50-50 with the Hilltops. That Laval game was like we killed them. Like they were like, I remember the first kickoff, there was like 3 of them lying on the field hurt, and it was just like, hey, we're dominating these guys, and then Jimmy got hurt, and it was the whole thing. I don't know how we lost that game, but I think we beat that team like 9 out of 10 times, sort of thing. So that was the worst loss because I think everyone knows we should have won that game. But shout out to, I mean, if they're listening, Hunter Carl, Adam Sinagra, those guys obviously getting it done this year, which was awesome for all of us who have been part of that team. It's such a good organization. I have nothing but good things to say about Calgary. Just really professional organization, and yeah, just good experience. Really kind of genuine people around it and there. So yeah.
And again, I think I had a conversation with some people after the CIS season. I was fortunate enough to work with the Manitoba Bison's football team this year firsthand and be able to cut film and just be behind the scenes. And the Calgary team this year, the Bisons had beaten them pretty badly in Winnipeg and
Did they?
had close games. And then they ended up winning the Vanier Cup, and it's super close game, the 50-yard Hail Mary
that did happen. That was you guys then. That
yeah.
It was what happened? It was like a Hail Mary and you guys tied it, and then so you went to overtime or something?
So what happened was I remember, so like my job continuing was hanging on the contingency of the Bisons winning this game, and they were losing by like 17 or 19 during the game. And then they got a punt return touchdown, and they had the ball on the 50 with 4 seconds left. And what happened was they did Hail Mary trips, and they motioned 4 receivers out to the right, and then Dez rolled right, stepped up, and fired a deep bomb down the field, and the Bisons batted it back in the hands of Tristan Dice, who was on the Regina 2013, the Regina Thunder team that 2013 you guys played against. Caught the ball on the Hail Mary, on the end of the Hail Mary, touchdown, and the Bisons. So Stan Pierre, defensive coordinator, he had told me. I was fortunate enough to be in a class of his before I got the position to work with the Bisons in the film room. And he said to me, our decision was already made long before that game. And ever since him and Coach Dobie have been a pair together, he said that they've practiced that play, and they've practiced the strategy behind. If they get a Hail Mary at the end of the game, they're going for 2 for the win. They're not going overtime. Huh. So they went for 2, and the throw was a bit behind Tristan, who was trying to catch the 2-point conversion for the win, and right into the hands of Nick Stats, who caught it and just took it out 5 yards and then hit the deck. And that was it. And it was just an absolutely utterly gut-wrenching feeling for the Bisons, but a euphoria for the Dinos. And they ended up winning they won the Hardy Cup against Saskatchewan, and then they won the I think it was the Mitchell Bowl they won against, I can't remember who they played. Wasn't Western. Was it Western? No, they beat McMaster. That's who it was. They beat McMaster at home, and then they went the Vanier Cup, and in Quebec, like they did when you guys, or actually no, you guys played in Hamilton. So they went to Quebec,
yeah,
beat the Montreal Carabins by like 2 scores, and that was it. And you know, I remember speaking about this later on with Coach Dobie, and he said to me, he's like, you know, he's like, I bet you, like, obviously Calgary, everyone's very happy to see them win. But if you look back at all the Calgary teams that lost Vanier Cups since 1995, the last time they had won before this year, the one that won this year probably wasn't one of the better ones, and was probably one of the ones in the lower end that ever went to the Vanier. And it's super funny that they were the ones that ended up winning it, you know, but hats off to them. They deserved it. They really faced a lot of adversity during that season, and they didn't have as many of the powerful, untouchable players on offense and defense that they'd had in the past. And they pulled it together, and they won fair and square, and they won a good game. And so, yeah, it's good to see that it all finally came together after a lot of heartbreaking losses that they had in the Vanier Cup.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I mean, Nick Stats too. Shout out, another guy who I played with out there. There's lots of them I can't name them all who still played on that team that won this last year. So yeah, congrats, you guys.
So we're getting down to 3-minute warning here, Whitman. So we're going to just do a firing round of quick questions before we're done our episode. And so I'm just going to fire as many questions as I can, and you can just answer them as quickly as you can think of the answer, and then we can wrap up like that.
Sure.
All right. So favorite memory watching a CFL game live?
Live 2011 when Harris won Canadian MVP and they won the Grey Cup.
You were at the Grey Cup in 2011?
I was, yeah.
It must have been an absolutely outstanding game. Well, for a Lions fan. For me, it wasn't.
Yeah, wasn't it? Who'd they beat again?
The Bombers.
Oh.
Yeah, it was that was the Swaggerville team, and then the Lions also, they had adversity that season too. They started 0-5 and they came back, and they were playing in Empire Stadium. I remember the Bombers beat them twice. They played in BC for the Grey Cup, and then I was like, oh, there's no way we're winning this game. And
yeah.
but a good on Andrew Harris. He eventually came back to Winnipeg and they won, so all is well. But okay, next question. Favorite football game from the time that you started playing with the Raiders until your last University of Calgary? Like the game that you liked the most, or the game that you thought you performed the best in, and like what your stat line was, if you can remember.
The Raiders is kind of different. I had a lot of good games with them, obviously, but U of Calgary, the Hardy Cup against UBC, and then the game after that against St. Francis. What's that, the Mitchell Bowl or something?
Yeah, Mitchell Bowl.
Yeah, I lit it up, those games. And it was cool because it was to go to the venue.
So, and okay, favorite BC line growing up?
I've always been, it's weird, people don't know it, but I'm more of a corner than a receiver. I still feel that's my best position. So anyways, Dante Marsh.
Favorite memory of watching any football game outside of the CFL? So it could be NFL, it could be
you
watched when you were younger, when you were still in high school.
It's hard to say. The thing that comes to my mind first was I watched that Vanier Cup this year, so I was maybe more glued to that than I have been any other game.
So you'd say that game was probably your favorite to watch?
At least it's on. I can't think of an NFL game I really cared that much about. I like NFL, but yeah, that one was good.
Favorite touchdown that you ever scored as a receiver? Or most memorable?
Probably. It was my first one. It was the first game I ever, week 1, my rookie year at the Raiders. I did a hook and go and got it, and that was quite a rush.
And favorite team to battle it, favorite opponent or favorite opponent that you rivaled against during your football career? It could have been at any level.
I want to say Ronnie Yell. We had a lot of really good battles in practice. BCFC, Robbie Yoakum. CIS, I don't even remember. I only played 1 year, so there wasn't really any.
And those must have been battles for the ages. And I'm sure that the friendships that have been fostered since your time playing is definitely one of the best things. I know that a lot of guys who are finished playing football will remember the most, or the memories you had in between games, not even maybe the ones during games, but practices, off the field, those kinds of things.
No doubt. I mean, when you're done, you start realizing that's what it was really all about, right?
So before we wrap up here, is there any last words or things that you wanted to mention, or people you wanted to shout out, or advice you wanted to give based on your experiences having played football?
I mean, not to be too cliche, but you want to, as far as advice go, I mean, just be thinking about your future too, right? So it eventually does come to an end, and most people go through a bit of like a existential crisis or whatever when that happens. And so you want to, obviously you want to find something you kind of are passionate about the same way you were when you were playing. So everyone tells you to start thinking about that when you're playing, and it's good advice. So.
And what big thing did you want to get yourself into now that you have fully emerged into the life after football for yourself?
So I was always more of like, I guess, like a nerd in high school. I wasn't part of all that. So I'm basically going more into kind of academia and stuff. So I like going to psychology, more academic psychology, sports psychology, performance psychology, kind of in that branch, so I can combine kind of the football stuff with it. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to go kind of the PhD route. That's what I spend most of my time doing now.
Nice. And is there any specific part of sports psychology that you find the most fascinating?
Probably the fact that no one really knows any of the theories of it. So it's like, if you take weightlifting or kinesiology, most people are pretty well, they know pretty well the theory behind it. So, if you're training for football, you don't want to necessarily be bodybuilding. You want to be doing explosive exercises, and people generally know how to do that. So I find it odd when it comes to psychology, which I'm sure everyone feels, or at least they should pay attention to. Certainly when you get to the higher levels of sport, the difference between who generally is successful and not starts stacking up more and more on kind of the psychological factors. But I look at it and no one really knows what's out there, the theory out there. So you might hear kind of these things like self-talk and stuff like that, which it's called psychological skills training. They're just, I mean, that's one part of it, but you want to know kind of the underlying theory. So if I could recommend one thing, it's this book. It's called The Psychology of Enhancing Human Performance. It's by Frank Gardner and Zella Moore. It's kind of stuck in kind of the realms of academia, but the theory in it's fascinating. So I'm surprised it's not talked about more in athlete circles. And obviously don't have time to go all into it now, but I think it'd be very beneficial for people to kind of at least understand that when they're existing through kind of the drama of playing a sport.
And again, you're right. I think that what's going on in between here is the most important thing when you're playing football at a higher and higher level, and that the strength and the skills you have kind of start to take a bit more of a less important role. Not saying that they're not important at all, but people's mental state of mind really helps in terms of their ability to achieve success at a high level of football. And especially once you get to the high level, everyone's really good. So those that are mentally tough are the ones that are going to set themselves apart from the ones that aren't as mentally tough.
Yeah. One more thing too, just because you thought of that, if anyone listening does make it to pro, one thing you want to do, and you'll find what a lot of successful people do right away, is they find kind of like an apprentice right away. So that would be like a veteran player who they get along with, and you want to just follow that guy and learn everything you can from him. So looking back, I should have just, like I always say, I was friends with a guy like Manny Arsenault and stuff, but you want to, that's a guy who's learned to have a great work ethic. He's learned to kind of navigate the mental aspects of playing pro very successfully. So you want to really, your first few years, kind of attach yourself to one of these guys you respect and really learn everything you can from them. That's how everyone does it. So you want to get in on that. You want to know that's how you should be doing it when you get there. There's lots of stuff those guys know that, and it's not necessarily about football. It's more about learning to, have a long pro career rather than a short one.
It's an absolutely amazing piece of advice. And especially when it comes to being a professional football player, having that mentorship is an absolutely key factor to finding the ways to create longevity in your career, because the Manny Arsenals of the world can get injured. They can have things happen to them. So having the mental state of mind to carry yourself forward will help you beat any injury or any adversity that you feel. And I definitely look forward to seeing academia that you are indulged in, and any of the publications that you'll be a part of as you continue on to a PhD in sports psychology. And so, Whitman, thank you again so much for being a part of the 4th episode of Huddle Up. And I wish you all the best with getting your way onto the path of being a sports psychologist, a sports psychology doctor, sports psychologist, or whatever it is you want to do in the field of sports psychology, with helping young athletes and helping athletes to develop their mental state of mind, to be able to create long careers that they're also going to really enjoy in the present moment and be able to look fondly upon once they're done.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Like I said, it's kind of just good to catch up with you too. So
absolutely. Well, thanks again, everyone, for tuning into this week's episode, and thank you for huddling up.